Rob here at it.Our, and today you're going to be taking a look at the Roadmaster high-powered diode wiring kit on our 2016 GMC Sierra 1500. Now our diode kit is going to allow us to take the signals from our motorhome and transfer them to our GMC, so whenever we're towing it, everyone around us knows what's going on. Whether we're changing lanes and we have our turn signal on, or we're slowing down, all the drivers around us can see the signals at the back of our truck. Keep in mind, this is only going to be one component for a complete safe flat tow setup for your Sierra. For our Sierra, we're going to need a base plate, a tow bar, safety cables, tow bar wiring, and a braking system. And specifically for our GMC Sierra, I do recommend getting a battery disconnect because it is going to make it easier rather than disconnecting the battery. Whenever you're towing, it is important to have your lights so everybody knows what's going on, but our diodes are going to allow us to get the lights to the back without having to have an extra step like you have with those magnetic lights. Those you're going to have to set them up each time you want to tow your truck, and then once we get where we're going, we're going to have to take them down. Not to mention, typically there's a wire that's going to be running all along the side of the truck going to the front to hook up to the motorhome, and that wire could potentially start dragging against the paint, and as we're going down the road, eventually scratch it. Well, our diodes are going to be a one-time installation, so we're not going to deal with any of that. Once they're in, we can completely forget that they're even there. Another nice thing about our diodes, since they're going to wire directly into our vehicle's electrical system, they are going to help protect it. If there's a problem on the motorhome end where there's something backfeeding or any kind of shorts, the diodes are going to protect the system because it's going to prevent any kind of that backfeeding getting into the electrical system on our truck, so we're not going to have to worry about any kind of damage. Now obviously that's going to be everything we need on the back, but we're going to have a way to put a plug on there as well as a cord to hook everything up. And Roadmaster does include the 6-way round plug that we can mount on the front of our Sierra, as well as the cord to hook up between our Sierra and our motorhome. And the plug that mounts on the front of our Sierra, it's going to be a plastic plug. It'll have a spring-loaded door so we can keep all the dirt, debris, and moisture out whenever we're not towing. Now the cable they're going to give us to hook everything up is going to be a coiled cable, which is going to be nice because it's going to take up some of that slack and prevent it from dragging on the ground when we're towing. Now one end will have a 7-way that'll hook into our RV, and the other end will have the 6-way that's going to plug into the front of our GMC. Now the coiled cable section here, it's going to be, when it's fully retracted, it's going to be about 15 inches, but it's going to stretch all the way up to 8 feet, so we have plenty of room even when we get our tow bar hooked up and those arms extend out. Our diodes are going to come with everything you need to get it installed. It's going to come with all the diodes, the connectors, ring terminals, along with 30 feet of 4-pole wire so we can run it from the back all the way to the front, and the plug, and the umbilical cord to hook the two together. Now we are going to have to take our taillights out, tie into the factory system. Now customers may think that's a little nerve-wracking, they don't want to tie into their system, they don't want to cut any wires. But rest assured, it is something you can do at home, and we'll go over how to test each wire and each function. So let's go ahead and do that together. To begin our installation, we want to start at the very front of our truck. Now I do want to mention we just got done installing our base plate, so that's why our bumper and the grill and everything else is removed, but it is going to make it a lot easier to route your wire. So we'll start at the front, giving yourself a good amount of slack so we have room to mount it, plenty of excess wire, and then we're going to start routing this all the way towards the back of our truck. So with ours, I'm just going to use this part of our base plate to kind of create a loop. So when I start routing it, it won't pull my wire completely loose, and I'll still have plenty of slack up here. So I started routing my wire coming along the frame rail here, and as soon as I got to the skid plate, I tried my best to go underneath everything and try to avoid the front differential and the steering components. My wire came right around the outside of the front diff, and I actually went to the outside of the frame rail so I could avoid the exhaust and the temperature. Then I started routing my wire. If we look up, we have factory wires and our emergency brake cable, and I started running it through the channel just along the frame rail here, zip tying it in place as I go to the factory wiring, and just followed it all the way down along the frame till we got to about our leaf spring. Now if we look up at the top, we can still see our wire. We went back, but then I passed it over to the other side of the frame rail. That way I had something to tie it to. We have a few more lines and wires over there. And we just followed that along the frame rail again, following it all the way down until we got to the very back of our bumper here. And we have that little piece of metal if we actually went over and dropped our wire down at the very back. Now we can move up top and we're going to pull our taillights out. So if you open up our tailgate, right on the inside we're going to have two bolts that are holding the taillight housing in place. You want to grab a T15 Torx bit and we'll pull those two screws out. Once you have both the bolts removed, you want to grab the taillight and you want to pull it as straight back as you can. A little bit of side-to-side movement's okay, but we have some alignment pins on the side and you don't want to push too far to where they break. And once you have your taillight pulled out, we'll have a connector down here, a little red tab. We want to push that tab away from the housing, maybe a little bit tight. But that's the locking tab that we need to slide away so we can get the taillight open. If you need to, you can get a flat blade screwdriver in there and pry it away from the taillight. Slide the red tab away, and the black tab on top, we'll squeeze it and disconnect the connector. Now for the one above that, we're just going to turn it, quarter turn, and then we can pull the bulb out. And we're going to set our taillight aside where it won't get damaged, and we'll pull the other side out as well. At this point, we want to pull back the loom on our connectors and expose the wire on the inside. Now if we look at the actual connector, the bulb one is going to be for our reverse light. So we're going to pay attention to the wires coming out of this connector. We'll have a red one, a brownish gray one, a green one, and a black one. We need to test each one of these wires to figure out what functions they serve. So right now I have my tail lights on with everything else turned off, that way I can isolate the signal. I'm going to take my circuit tester and I'm going to check each one of these pins to see which one is activated. So we can see, if we're looking at the plug with the square on top, the bottom left pin is activating our tail lights. So if we look, it's going to be the brownish gray wire over here on the driver's side. Now we want to check the passenger side as well, and we're going to write down the color or remember the color and function of our wire. Now I went ahead and turned my tail lights off, and now I have an assistant pressing on the brake pedal so I can isolate that signal. We'll go through and check each one of our wires. So now if we're looking at it with the square on top, it's going to be the top left pin, which if we go to the back, it's going to be the green wire on the driver's side. So our green wire is going to be our brake and our turn signal, and the brown wire is going to be our taillight signal. Now again, we can go ahead and do that whole process over on the passenger side and write down the functions and color of each wire. Now fortunately for us, if we look, we verified and tested everything, but we have the exact same color and location for each wire and the functions on the passenger side. We want to grab our wires now, reach underneath, and you grab a pair of cutters, and we want to separate each one of these wires so we have 4 individual ones to work with. We'll just go right in between each one of the wires, and very carefully just cut just enough, being careful not to damage the wire. But then we should be able to grab just the end of it and start pulling them apart, and you want to go all the way up to the last anchor point so we have plenty of loose wire. We'll do that for each one so that they're all separate. And since we're on the driver's side, I'm going to start with my brown and my yellow wire first. Now if we look right here in this little pocket where our wires are going down, you can actually see the ground here, so I should be able to reach underneath my truck and feed my wires up, at least enough to where I can grab them and I can pull all the slack through. Now what I like to do just to make sure that my wires are not going to fall back down is I like to grab my wires, make sure I have all the slack, and then I'll just take a zip tie and I'm going to zip tie it to the existing wiring there. That way I know it's not going to go back under the truck, get caught in anything when we're driving down the road. Now that we have our wires up top, we can start making our connections. So we'll start with our brake and our turn signal wire, which is the green one. Go ahead and cut that in half. Just come downstream from the plug. Cut the wire in half and we'll strip back both ends of it. Then we can grab the diode that has all blue connectors on it. We'll grab 2 of the connectors, doesn't matter which one. Pull 2 of them off. We're going to slide it over the bare end of our wire. And we'll crimp it in place. We'll do the same thing for the other end of our wire. I'm going to grab the last terminal off of our diode. And we're going to estimate about how much wire we need to match up with our other green wire. Now, I like to give myself a little bit of excess, so I'll come down a little bit further. I'll cut the wire, then I'll strip back the end of it, and we'll crimp our spade in place. Then we can grab our diode, and you'll notice that we're going to have 2 terminals on the inside and 1 terminal on the outside. And that's going to allow us to make our connection have 2 signals going in, going out to our single tail light. So we want the connector that's closest to the plug to go to the out terminal. And then the other 2 are just going to plug into the in terminals. Doesn't matter which one, just want to make sure you get 1 on each terminal. So your brake and turn signal diode should look like this once you have everything hooked up. Now we can make our connection for our taillight signal, which is going to be that brownish gray colored wire. Again, cut that wire in half, strip back both ends, and we'll crimp on a blue spade terminal on each one of our wires. This time we want to make sure we grab the diode that has the yellow connector on it. So we can remove that, set it aside for right now. Just like the other one, the connector that's closest to the plug, go to the outside. We'll plug it in. Then the other one can go to either one of the in terminals. We'll estimate about how much brown wire we're going to need. We'll cut it, except this time, and make sure we hold on to the excess. We're going to strip back the end of our excess wire and the end of the wire coming from the bottom. And we're going to combine the 2 wires together. And then we'll take our yellow spade terminal, slide it in place, and crimp it together. The whole reason why they give you that yellow one is because it's a lot easier to get 2 wires inside this larger terminal than it is trying to cram them into that blue spade terminal. Crimp it down, make sure everything's secure. We can plug it into the other end of our diode. Then we'll take the free end of our wire here and we're going to drop it down so it can meet up with our green wire at the bottom, and we're going to hook everything up the same way on the passenger side. Now obviously this isn't going to reach the passenger side, going all the way down, underneath, across, and then up to our taillights. So it's probably a good idea to pick up some extra wire as well as some butt connectors, that way you can extend it out. And I would suggest maybe picking up about 5-10 feet. You may not need it all, but it's always nice to have extra wire laying around. And you can find extra wire as well as butt connectors here at it.Our. Our last wire is going to be our white wire. This is going to be our ground, so we're going to attach it to a solid piece of metal on our frame. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the excess wire off. I'll strip back the end of it. Then we can take the included ring terminal from our kit. We'll slide it over the end of our wire, and we'll crimp it in place. And we have a really nice solid point right here, right above our spare tire. I'm going to kind of stay to the side of the frame rail here. That way when we lower and raise our spare, it won't be in the way. But we'll take the self-tapping screw that comes in our kit, and I'm going to start a pilot hole before I actually put the ring terminal in place, and just go directly into the bottom of the frame. Now that it's started, slide my screw in my ring terminal and secure it down. Whenever you tighten it down, you want to make sure that ring terminal doesn't move, but you don't want to strip the screw out either. Now that we have everything hooked up, I'm going to put our bulbs and sockets back in place. You want to make sure you put that locking tab back in. Then we can take our diodes, we can actually just tuck them in that little pocket, line up our tail lights, put them back in and get all the fasteners back in place. Now that our taillights are back in place, we can move back up front. However, we're going to be installing the rest of our components for our flat toe setup, and then we'll put our fascia back in place and wire up the plug. So now that the bumper's back in place, I'll show you how I got my wiring through and where exactly we're going to mount it. I actually used a hole saw to cut a hole through the bottom plastic here, but on the inside there is a metal frame that's on the inside of the bumper here, so I just wanted to make sure that I was far enough away that I wasn't going to damage the wire by rubbing against the metal. But I made sure to cut a hole that's big enough so that the back of my plug can fit in, and then I actually just used my plug itself as a template and marked out the mounting holes and drilled a couple holes so I could put my bolts through. Then I just push my wire through the hole. We'll grab our plug. We're going to take the boot off the back, and for now we're just going to slide it onto the wires so it's out of the way. Now we want to separate each one of these wires so we have one separate wire to work with. The easiest way to do that, just go ahead and cut in between them, and we'll just pull them apart like we did in the back. Except this time we don't need that much wire. We only need maybe a couple inches or so. So we'll just pull it apart till we have little bits to work with, and we'll strip back the end of each one of our wires. Now if we look at the back of our plug, we're going to have 6 terminals, and they're going to have a Phillips screw that's holding it in. So you want to grab yourself an extremely small Phillips screwdriver, and when you loosen these up, you don't want to take them all the way out because they're very easy to lose and extremely small. But our terminals are going to be labeled. The top one's going to be trailer marker. That'll be our brown wire. And the next one over here is going to be GD for ground. That's going to be our white wire. Then LT for left turn. It's going to be our yellow wire. RT for right turn. It's going to be our green wire. Then finally, the center pin is going to be your 12-volt power source, which is labeled A for auxiliary. And then the last pin next to our trailer marker is going to be labeled S, and that's going to be for your trailer brakes. So we're going to go through and hook up all of our wires into the corresponding terminals. And whenever you put your wire in, you just want the copper to go into the terminal. I always like to leave just a little bit of the copper showing. That way I know that the insulation's not going to get in there and cause any kind of issues. So once you have all your wires hooked up, this is how it should look on the back of your plug. I want to put a little bit of dielectric grease inside the connector, and hopefully that'll prevent any kind of corrosion from building up and moisture from getting inside. If you need some dielectric grease, you can pick it up here at it.Our. Once we have it all filled up, just slide the boot back over. And what I like to do is I like to take some electrical tape, and I'm going to tape the boot to the back of the plug, and then I'm also going to run it as far up the wire as I can to help protect the wire and keep everything together. Then I'll just take the hardware and pass it through my bracket all the way through the bumper. I'm going to reach behind the bumper and loosely secure it with a nut until I can get everything in and tightened up. Now the final step of our installation is going to be testing our circuits to make sure everything is working properly. So I have my truck hooked up to a tester to simulate my motorhome, and if I turn on the lights, we can see that my tail lights are working, as well as the left turn signal, my brake lights, and my right turn signal. All we have left to do now is hook up to our motorhome and hit the road. But that'll finish up your look at the Roadmaster high power diode wiring kit on our 2016 GMC Sierra.